This is Building a Creative Life. I'm Pam Vale, a New England artist, bringing the world of creativity to your door through casual conversations with artists, creators, and everyday people, helping curious, midlife women begin their next creative chapter. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Today I'm joined by Jessica Brown, the founder of Clementine Montessori, and a passionate educator who has devoted her work to helping children and families discover the joy of learning. After years teaching middle school and time at home raising her own kids, Jessica felt called to early childhood education and became Montessori certified in 2018. In our conversation, we talk about what Montessori really means in practice. Creating environments where curiosity thrives. Creativity isn't something extra, but essential, and children are trusted to explore at their own pace. We also explore how these same principles can inspire us as adults, whether in parenting, in community, or in our own creative lives. Be sure to stay tuned until the end, where I'll share my reflections and some thoughts on how you can bring these ideas into your everyday life. Well, welcome, Jessica. I'm really excited to have you on the show. I'm excited to talk about a topic that we both are very passionate about for different reasons, and I'm happy that my audience gets to learn a little about something that's really meaningful to me. So I would love it if you could share a little bit about you and what you do. And
Sure. I'd love to. Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Pam, for having me. This is a neat opportunity for me because I love talking about Montessori, and that's actually what I've kind of made my whole professional life to be now. And so being able to do it in a different way is a fun experience. So thank you. So I am first and foremost a teacher in general, and I started my career teaching middle school. I thought I would be a high school teacher. I sort of envisioned myself maybe not quite like a Dead Poets Society type of a vibe, but that was maybe a little bit what I was picturing, and then ended up doing some student teaching with younger kids. And so, hence this trajectory going from high school all the way down to the youngest kids that I'm teaching now. So I should have maybe had a clue that would happen, but really loved the middle schoolers, loved the life that they brought to the classroom every day, and realized that was where I wanted to focus my job search, and then ended up teaching 7th grade English language arts for 7 years until my son was born, and then ended up taking some time off with him. And I really enjoyed my job, and I loved working with the kids. I loved the subject matter, but starting to feel some of the burdens of the admin side of public school, that was starting to feel challenging. And so I wasn't sure I would return. I didn't think I actually would probably return to that classroom setting, but then wasn't sure what I would do, honestly. And so, interwoven with that, if we're looking at the concept of, creativity, if that's what's guiding this conversation, I, as a young person, have always felt creative but not artistic, if that sort of makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I would say crafts, not art, and I never could make drawings look the way I wanted them to look or whatever, but I did experience creativity in a lot of other ways, in terms of watching, if we watch a YouTube video to do a craft now. When I was a kid, I will go to the library and check out every book that they've had since the 70s about all kinds of different crafting topics, and I wouldn't even execute because there was no Amazon to get the supplies, but I just loved seeing how people brought these ideas to life. And then, all kinds of, my favorite things are like fiber arts, needlecraft, etc. And so doing a lot of that alongside this teaching career, and not really feeling a pull to connect the two. I taught a crochet club, or I led a crochet club as a middle school teacher. And then when my son was born and I was home, at first I'm kind of in this newborn fog, new mom fog. And then from there, as he became a little bit more, as he was living a little bit more within a routine, we had some more predictability to our days, then that was what I really dove into a lot of crafting from, and at that time there was this sort of surge of the internet intersecting with art and craft. And, and just, I was quilting, I was knitting, I was crocheting, I was sewing a lot, doing a lot, and using nap time kind of for those
right.
Experiences, yes,
right?
and some of the preschool. Well, exactly, and staying up probably honestly way too late, and our dining room became a craft studio, and it was a really, looking back, it was a time that felt very energizing in that way for me, because if there were times that I felt challenged by motherhood, I also had a separate outlet that allowed me to have something that belonged to me, and combining it with my family too. I think the thing I am most proud of that I've ever made, one for each child, for my son, this Halloween costume that I'm not a garment sewer very well, but I can do it, and I somehow pulled together this costume that looking back, I cannot believe it worked and turned out the way I wanted it to. But the other piece of that too is it wasn't just executing the sewing part. It was fun for me to think about how to bring all these different components to life for this Halloween costume, and then for my daughter, just she had a stuffed animal she loved, and I made her a quilt, a rendering of that stuffed animal as a quilt. And where I'm going with all this is just to say that if I'm reflecting back at that time, it was really a neat way that then now professionally for me, I started to see that if I would like to have a thing for a purpose, I can figure out how to bring that thing to life, and I don't have to necessarily buy that thing. I can, and sometimes I do, but I can decide to make it myself, and then I can make it the way I want it to be made from a practical standpoint, and then from an aesthetic standpoint. And then the final piece is that it brings together for me this desire to make and the satisfaction that brings. So I was doing that for home with them for 7 years, and then just really a true moment of serendipity ended up just substituting at my kids' Montessori preschool. I started as the mystery reader, so I would bring a book, every couple of months, and the director said, I can see that you really love working with kids, you're good with kids, would you be interested in substituting? And that was perfect for me because I was not ready to go back into the workforce and still wanted to have some flexibility. So I was really just working in the same setting, same hours as my kids locally. It was just a really easy way to kind of dip my toe back in, and found that I really, really enjoyed it. And then our school opened a toddler classroom. So Montessori is frequently, in the US anyway, I think mostly thought of as a preschool experience. And it's divided into 3-year segments. So 3 to 6-year-olds, we call that primary, and that's what our school had taught. And then just due to some changes in the way our public school district was running their kindergarten program, a new classroom was going to be opened, a toddler classroom for 2-year-olds. And I love 2-year-olds, and I happened to be overheard saying that one day at pickup. And my boss kind of filed that away, or the director filed that away, and said, would you be interested in being the assistant? Because at that time I was not Montessori trained. And I said, sure. I actually, again, had done this little bit of work, was thinking, okay, same thing. I'm still with her in these younger years. We'll be going to work together. And then as it turned out, none of the teachers there wanted to do the other training, which is for 0 to 3-year-olds. And I was interested in that. So for the first year, I just needed one more college class to make myself official as far as the state went. We said, we'll see how this goes. It was working well. I loved what I was doing. And then I pursued my Montessori training, which is really, a humbling experience to be back in school after all these years away. I had done my master's right out of college, so I had not done anything academic for many years, and balancing having kids and going back to school, it really gives me so much appreciation for anyone who is pursuing a full degree with kids, because this was not anything close to that level of rigor, and it was still taxing, but fun. So much fun. The conversations I was having were so interesting. I was able to bring it into the classroom, the very next day, creating materials and just learning and being able to immerse myself in these topics that I just find so fascinating. Then ended up really enjoying the next years, 4 more years I taught there. And then during COVID, as for so many of us, upset the apple cart kind of everyone's life. I was home for a year away from the classroom. Our school did open After that summer, following, a summer of 2020, they opened in the fall with a lot of modifications. And what ended up naturally falling into place was that we needed a new office manager. Our office manager had left. I was not coming back to the classroom, but I knew a lot about the school as a parent, as a teacher. I did that for a year. And all this to say, I had been thinking for a long time about, was I ready to take on and try something different, something of my own? And I had resisted that, for a lot of reasons. I'm not sure this is the right move. And then it sort of was put into my lap that here's the opportunity, because I didn't feel comfortable stepping back into the classroom I had left because there were new teachers there, and I didn't want to usurp their leadership. And I had this admin experience, and so this thing I had been dreaming about, what will this space look like, came to be. So what I do now is I teach in a Montessori classroom of my own. It's called Clementine, and a fine motor activity for the youngest children is peeling a clementine. It's kind of a quintessential Montessori toddler activity. And also they're cute and perky, and so it kind of is a name that fits. And so what I do is I have a classroom in our downtown area. It's just, I shouldn't say just, it's a storefront. It's got a bookstore on one side and a kind of a gift shop on the other. And it is set up though with high fidelity Montessori environment, and I'm teaching adult-child classes. And so a parent, a grandparent, a nanny, whatever important adult is coming that day brings the group of children, and we have an hour to an hour and a half of Montessori learning that is kind of a microcosm of what children would experience in a full morning of Montessori preschool. All the way, I start at my youngest ever, 8 days old, so an infant class.
Wow.
Where we're doing a lot of parent education and setting up the infant environment so parents can see what that looks like, and have a way to talk to each other about what new parenthood is like and stresses and challenges, and then also setting the stage for what Montessori can look like starting in infancy all the way up to, I have some 5-year-olds that kind of stay. They're going to their own school experience and then still coming once in a while with parents. And so what I say is that what I love about my job is I do love working with kids and families. I really do enjoy that so much and feel very fulfilled by it, and that is sort of like the thing I'm called to do. But for this conversation where we're talking about creativity, one thing I really love about my job also is that I am able to use every part of my brain. And I think that lends itself really well to this concept because, my kids tease me that I'm kind of like a spreadsheet nerd, and which I am. So that's, maybe not what you would expect from somebody who does what I do, but that is another way my brain works. And so everything from figuring out how can I best solve this particular problem through this technology application, all the way to, at night I'm sitting down and I'm cross-stitching some apples onto some wooden circle blanks to create a matching activity. And, that's a work task, right. But then that's a creative task for me, as I think I would like to.
I think that sort of, okay, there's so much I want to talk to you about.
Yes, and I was talking for a long time, so I want to hear from you.
It's awesome. This is exactly what I love. So, the first thing I wanted to touch on, and I want to talk about what you do with parents and how this Montessori philosophy can apply to anybody. But I want to go back to something you talked about in your career shift. How, for you, how was that, like your creative expression with that? Number one, you started a business, right? So you had both sides of your more technical brain, and then obviously it's a very creative business. How was that transition for you into this new role and taking on things that maybe like weren't great that you have to do for a business, and then other things that you enjoyed?
And things that aren't in my wheelhouse either necessarily. Still got to do them.
Yeah, I would love for you if you could share a little bit about that experience personally for you, because I have women that may be at a stage where they're thinking about a career shift.
Mm-hmm. It's scary. It's interesting. I will say, for me, the first thing to point out is that I know many people, when considering a career shift, they may be considering going from, business to nursing, or, something where it's really a huge shift. For me, it felt a little bit more like steps on a path. And so it maybe wasn't quite as drastic as some people are experiencing or considering. But yeah, it still was a lot to wrap my mind around, in the sense that I had to, I think part of it was the shifting of responsibility. So it was every other time I had been employed by somebody else, the structures were in place. Mm-hmm. And I'm always a person who has kind of made opinions known. I mean, within the realm of being asked, but I'm a vocal person. I have a lot of ideas about how I like to do things, and sometimes people like them and sometimes they don't, but I was never a put my head down, go to work and leave person. I was always very involved. So it felt natural to now sort of fully take the reins. But then the piece that was maybe overwhelming was the real lack of a safety net, where and part of the reason I made the decision to shift in this way was that I was ready, kind of deliberately ready, to be able to be the one responsible for how things go. So, basically I would like to do things the way I think, it will be best, and then accept the fact that I am open to being very wrong and make shifts and changes, which is Montessori. We are basically setting up an environment for children that we think will suit their needs, and then using observation to determine that we have made the correct guess, or we need to make adjustments in order to better serve their needs. And so it's constantly evolving. And same thing is that I, as a business owner, am excited to be doing that. But it is also a feeling of a different kind of pressure, where I used to be able, I was always thinking about work, I guess, in some way, because I cared about it, and there's always more to do than there is time to do it. But there was somebody else responsible for a lot of tasks that now are fully falling on me. And it's not that I have no support. I have an extremely supportive family. I mean, my kids ask me, how's Clementine going today? How are your classes? They're each, they help me in the classroom. My husband, is the one who fixes the tech things and hangs, when I have an idea, I need this hung on the wall, So I have all of that. It's not that I'm doing everything fully myself, but the thought leadership, I guess, is all coming from me. So that piece was challenging. I think it felt also, though, extremely freeing, because I think I had begun to feel some frustration about being contained in a setting that didn't always align with my own, I don't want to say my own values, a little bit. I did, there were some disconnects maybe between the institution that I was working for and the way I wanted to do things. And so it felt great to be able to say, I would like to do this the way I think is the best way.
Right. Which comes with good and bad, right? It comes with responsibility. Yes. Yeah. But then there's great
So there's
benefits.
The balance piece.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Definitely.
So, overall for me, it's been a positive shift. I'm still learning all the time, because I'm seeing the things that I'm not as good at on the business side and trying to learn and improve those. And then continuing to try to improve the things I do think I'm good at, which, working with kids and families, it's not that there's nothing to learn. It's more so that feels more like a gift that I have, and then I still want to keep developing it, just as, any skill or any talent is. You might be really good at something and then still want to become better.
Absolutely. I think there's always chance for improvement. And your personal creative outlets, like you were saying, making your beautiful materials or things that you did before finding Montessori full time. Do you find that you're still able to enjoy those personally, or is it now because it's connected to work or tied to something else? Like, do you still have that personal outlet, or do you have things you do that aren't connected to your business?
I would say it is just harder to find time generally to be creative, and by creative in this sense, I mean artistic pursuits as opposed to how do we interweave creativity into our lives overall. I mean, there's certainly plenty of chance for that. But if I'm talking about, when was the last time I made a quilt? It was a long time ago. And frequently, I guess I appreciate the job I have, because if I had a different type of business that did not call on me to engage in any of these creative pursuits, I think it would be a lot easier to put it fully on the back burner. Sometimes I feel like, well, at least I have this need. The flip side is then sometimes it does feel a little bit like pressure. So as an example, we in Montessori, especially in primary and younger, we have a community meal during each class. And so a tenet of Montessori is using as many natural and beautiful materials as possible. So, it would be very easy to hand out a paper plate and throw a cracker on and call it good, but we take the time to use real ceramic dishes. And where I'm going with this is placemats. And my classroom is small, my tables are not big, and if I were to buy a commercial placemat, it would dwarf the table. So I need smaller placemats, and I know how to sew, so I want them to look away, so I'm sewing the placemats. And when it's placemat 27. It starts to feel a little bit less like creativity and a little more like drudgery. Yes, exactly. So that's a double-edged sword too, where I appreciate that I can make these things the way I want them, and the first couple feel great, and then after a while, it feels like I'm kind of making myself get it done. But the flip side of it was, I will say, then every time I'm using those, and every time the children are putting them out on the table, I have this little glimmer of, I made that. And I get to experience that over and over every time. I have different seasonal bins, because Montessori is not theme oriented like you might think of many preschool experiences being, where it's like, okay, we're going to just talk about pumpkins the entire month of October. But and this is a neat thing about Montessori too. This is a tangent, but to say that Montessori sometimes is viewed in our culture anyway as rigid. And I think it can be expressed that way, and I've certainly met educators who I would consider rigid or more rigid than I would like to be. But there are definitely routines and structures that guide every Montessori classroom. But the flip side of that, then, there is plenty of room for individual teacher expression and creativity. Mm-hmm. So all that to say, if I am having this feeling of I made it, I did it this way, every single time I see something that I'm pulling out of, say, this bin of stuff, including a lot of pumpkin things that I've made, because there are still some, because what we're trying to do is allow children to live through a seasonal cycle and understand that those cycles exist, and begin to feel the sense of them. And the point I'm making is, every time I pull out that bin of October things, and I pull out a few things that I have made, I get to experience the joy of kind of remembering the experience of making them, and the satisfaction of making them.
And the reason
so
too.
It's both.
Yeah, and I think, going back to your talking about your children's Halloween costumes. So mm-hmm. I'm very crafty as well, and one of my favorite memories of crafting is a specific Halloween costume for my son when he was younger. Mm-hmm. And part of the joy, and now we go to Renaissance fairs now, and so I make costumes for everybody,
so
and it's
beautiful costumes.
It's so much fun, and so part of the joy of creative expression for me in those is thinking about the other person and thinking about the joy that yes. they're going to get from it, or the experience that they're going to have, wearing or utilizing what I made. And so I could imagine it must be similar, because you're touching these children's lives, and mm-hmm. you're setting them up for something that they don't even realize, and they don't, they're what's the word? They're like absorbing this information, this visual information, and there's yes. something like coming through you, I feel.
Well, and the tactile experience is mm-hmm. just an entire sensory, and that's a huge portion, component of Montessori is right. different sensory experiences. Yeah. So what they're seeing, what they're touching, the sounds things make, and the things I'm making, I guess, probably don't make a lot of sounds, right? But sometimes, I might think to myself, how can I, a lot of what I make, half of what I make is an inspiration. Like, I would like to have a certain thing. How can I do it? And then other times it comes from sort of a problem I would like to solve, where I realize, I don't have enough materials that meet this need for children. How could I do that? And sometimes it means shopping because someone else did it better and I don't have the time to execute. And other times I think, gosh, I could do that. I'd like to do that. Right. And sometimes it's, I see an object. This is kind of a preschool teacher joke in general, not just Montessori, but like either, something comes in the mail like as part of packaging and I think I can't throw that away. There'll be a way to use it. Or, I found these beautiful tins. They're little metal tins, and I thought there has to be a way to, they're so lovely and they're a beautiful size for children. There has to be a way for me to make these something they can use and enjoy.
Did you?
But to your point about, so that's the other thing is I have a list 100 items long, and will I get to them all? No. So I am also a person, probably not very orderly, not very Montessori, in a lot of projects in various states of completion. So that one is like on the lower end. I own the supplies I need to execute. Have I done it yet? I have not. But to your point about thinking about someone using and enjoying, I think for me it's been freeing to, because we'll say, I think they aren't necessarily aware of it, but I do agree with you that children are having an experience with something handmade that they might not have with something that isn't. They, at the age they are, some of them 13, 14 months old, do they remark on it? Do they, respond with glee? Not necessarily. A lot of times parents admire things that I've made. But I think then it is partly me wanting to make for others in a way that they visibly enjoy, and then also realizing that I can take pride and joy in my own creative process and my own products, and that both of those can be valuable. Because if you're a maker, you've probably had the experience of you put so much time and care into making something for someone, and then they sort of say, "Oh, thanks," and you're kind of like, that was 50 hours, or I thought and cared so much about it. So I think for myself, what I have had to do, what I'm glad to have done, is take on a lot of the joy in the making, and I appreciate and enjoy it, and I also hope that the other person will, but I'm not putting everything into that bucket. I'm kind of keeping it available for both.
And that's really important. That's really important for creative expression. I mean, I feel like for myself, a lot of times I'm a very selfish artist, and I've been a creator my whole life, and most of what I do is for me. I do it because I want the experience. I do it because, like you said, I have materials, or I want to try using something in an unexpected way, or, I just want the process of something. I see something that somebody did, and I just want to try it. I want to try the craft. I want to use the tool. I want to experience the, making something from nothing. And that's enough. Right. Sometimes that's all it needs to be. And you don't even have to finish.
Right. Well, and that's the thing too, is I think sometimes I used to be very hard on myself about unfinished crafts. And I will say I have also, I have released some of that to realize that sometimes, and this is what we say to parents, what I say to parents all the time, because they think, sometimes they are taken aback at how many times, for example, a child will repeat a particular artistic activity, or, for an hour, a child will sit and just experience, clay or Play-Doh. And for the adult, it can start to feel like I'm getting a little bored. For the child, it's still invigorating, it's still exciting and fun, and it doesn't necessarily have to end with a product that they even care about. I say, pay attention to the day. There will come a day where your child will begin to care more about taking home artwork. So frequently, I find the completed artwork, and by that I mean, say it was a drawing and I put out some crayons and the child can color in, back on the shelf. They only cared about experiencing that creative process,
and I got chills.
The product is not important at all. Same, and so I have to say I have had to release for myself from saying I must come up with a product that is satisfying. I do enjoy it, but the time spent is valuable too. And I mean, and that comes to, someone who is not necessarily so focused on the craft the way I am might say, you spent 50 hours making that. How much is your time worth? How much does that actually cost? And I say, well, but for me, the experience was entertaining. It was fulfilling. It was, the thinking I got to do about the thing I was going to make was fun. That is something that I really enjoy. The same way someone else might enjoy watching a football game. Not that I never will do that either. But whatever your hobby is, like, it's probably not. It's probably not financially efficient. We're doing things because they bring us joy, or they invigorate us in some way, not necessarily for an endpoint.
And as far as I'd love to talk about some of the principles of Montessori education. So for the listeners that don't know, I went to Montessori as a young in primary, and then my son went from preschool through 8th grade to an authentic Montessori program. And I worked at the Montessori too in admin for about 7 or 8 years. And I was just so fully immersed in every aspect of it. And I see my son just turned 26 yesterday. And the biggest question we got asked was what happens after Montessori, especially for a program that goes through 8th grade. And then they're going to go to public high school or go to high school somewhere else. And I see the result of this Montessori education in my son every single day. So I would love to talk about some of the principles, like a prepared environment or like an uninterrupted work cycle, self-guided learning, all those are like a love of learning, and all those things that can carry forward or be applied to anybody's life. And if you could touch a little bit on that aspect of it. I know you teach your parents different aspects of Montessori, and I would love for our listeners to just get the benefit of that. It's so beautiful and it's so accessible to anybody.
Right. And the thing is, and I love that you said that, because that's a great starting point, is that Montessori can feel, kind of gets a bad rap for being inaccessible. But in fact, the basic principles of Montessori are things that parents are already doing and don't know that they're doing. And then and Montessori's philosophy emerged from the ways that children learn and behave, and all she did was watch and see what they already naturally did, and then overlay these different ways to support them, the prepared environment, the beautiful, what we call the didactic materials that are really ingenious. So it's not that Montessori didn't bring anything to it, but more so that what she created came from these threads of behavior that, the human behavior. And so the neat thing about it is that it's very timeless, and it really, it is something that can be and already is happening. And then we can just, as I can, as and other Montessori educators, are bringing it to kids and families in a more deliberate way. So, if you're touching on first the idea of a prepared environment, that's a perfect kind of touch point with the theme of this conversation, because there are certain elements that a Montessori classroom should have, and then the ways that those are expressed are infinite, as numerous as the classrooms that exist. And so if you walk into any high fidelity, and by that we mean, because anybody can say this is a Montessori school, there are governing bodies, but there's no legal restriction on saying you're a Montessori school, because you might not be. And so, of course there's a marketing angle, people will express it more or less faithfully. But if you walk into a school that is really trying to and carefully following Montessori principles, you will see some common threads throughout them. But what this prepared environment concept means is that we as educators are thinking about, how is this space that we are creating, serving the needs of children? And that's really the main question that we, and you have to be real deliberate about it. And I have to remind myself of it frequently, that I have to be humble enough to say that I may have done something that with setting up the space that isn't serving kids' needs best. I spent a lot of the summer doing that, actually. I'm starting my 5th year, and I would have, if you'd asked me, do you know exactly how you want to set up your classroom, when I first did, I said, yeah, 80%, I got to see how things work in this specific space, but I think I know a lot. And then now looking at how it's evolved over time, following what kids need, what the space allows for us, and doing all of that in a thoughtful way, that's kind of one principle of Montessori, is that we're creating a learning environment that really allows children to do some of the other things you mentioned. So to develop this love of learning. And by that, it's not that we think kids are running around saying, I love learning, but rather that we're creating in their brains a view of life, an approach to life of curiosity, of a willingness to experiment, of thriving in an environment that invites them to experiment and be curious, and not to be recipients of teaching, but instead to allow adults who have taken the time to care about setting up this environment to guide them in a process that they really are a part of. And really, in a true Montessori environment, and there's a lot of controversy is the wrong word, a lot of discussion around how much adults should be involved, because I think, especially in this US culture, like we really, we still got learning standards. How are they being met? There are a lot of outside pressures, and it's hard to trust that what we're really meant to do is observe children and respond to them, and guide them. So in some settings, some Montessori settings, a teacher is called a guide instead of a teacher. I don't say it that way. It's not really part of my training. But the point is, there's this freedom for children to work for as long as is interesting to them on an activity. Mm-hmm. And then the adult has to hold back and say, I think you should be finished with this puzzle because you have done it 4 times. Do you really need to do it a 5th? If the child is still concentrating and working constructively, and we learn as teachers to observe what that looks like and make those decisions in the moment, if the child is still constructive with that work, it's the adult's job to let the child keep working. Right. And that is where mastery emerges from, is the opportunity to guide their own learning and repeat. And a public school, a traditional school environment is set up that we are spending this amount of time on this subject, this amount of time on that subject each day. And in Montessori, we need to look at more of the totality of a child's experience to say, right now, so Montessori talked about something called sensitive periods, meaning that a child's brain is really primed to do a particular kind of learning. And when a child is in a sensitive period for a particular kind of learning, then that learning comes easily and joyfully. And so we need to accept that for a period of time, a child may really be focusing on, we see this with infants all the time, when a child is learning to walk, that's all the child wants to do. They want to walk all day long. And imagine if we as parents said, well, you've done enough walking for today, it's time to do a puzzle. We would never do that. So, and of course there are practicalities in life, it's not that there aren't, but if we come at them from a standpoint of how can we most faithfully honor the child's inner drive to learn and respect that they know something about what they need to know, and that the activities they're drawn to are responsive to that. That to me is actually the most sort of transformative thing about Montessori, is that we are relinquishing our own control and instead saying, what do we offer? We offer the space where children can guide these experiences for themselves, and then the trust and respect that what they feel called to probably meets a need. Which is not to say that an adult just lets it go. And I think sometimes we think of Montessori as rigid, and we also can think of Montessori as very free. I've had people say it's just a free-for-all. Kids do whatever they want all day. And realizing that actually this concept of freedom within structure is really the most beautiful thing about Montessori, is that there are routines we follow, and there are particular ways of presenting activities, but then also it's paired with this just tremendous trust and respect for kids.
I think that definitely translates into my art as an adult, is having those that freedom within limits. So I feel that especially people that are new to creative expression for themselves, having some kind of guidelines or some kind of limitations, and then being able to explore and play within that, definitely it makes it easier. It releases some judgment. It gives you more freedom, basically.
Right. And it's kind of neat if you're saying that. I'm following as social media knows that I like art projects, I guess, right? And so the way we do art in Montessori might feel different than the way some people are used to experiencing, art education. But the idea is, again, very process focused, and also, using children's creative products to sometimes make something beautiful out of them, instead of saying, I demand that you make a flower. If a child wants to explore artistic materials, might we decide to let them do that and then turn that somehow into something seasonal or beautiful that will hang on the wall? So as an example, all summer long in my classes, there's a different process art activity available, and that we're doing it all on just typical construction paper. And then at the end of the summer, I chop all those pieces up. And so it's like one piece of construction paper might have been worked on by up to 3 or 4 or 5 children before we need a new one. And then I have a big stack, and then we turn that into a mosaic at the end of the summer. So this year we made a watermelon. Last year we made a goldfish. So it's partly me guiding, how can we turn this into a product that feels striking, that is, noticeable to adults, because, we've all seen hanging on the refrigerator scribbles, and it's not that they aren't lovely or that I don't sit and think about all the work that it took the child to hold the crayon or pencil and execute it. The average person is probably not doing that, but the idea is, if we say, look at this beautiful artistic product, this came from all of this beautiful artistic exploration.
Right.
So to your point, getting back to your point, the idea is that not necessarily that there can be no parameters at all. Sometimes what those do is allow us to end up in a place that kind of gives that exploration purpose. And then I do think there's plenty of space in our lives for just totally free exploration that may not turn into a product at all, as you were saying.
Absolutely.
And I've abandoned a lot of knitting projects, just saying, this isn't working out the way I wanted it to, or it didn't happen how I expected, and that's okay.
Yep. And I know that building community is important to you in what you do, and I would love to hear a little bit about. I think, do you do like parent nights where you do for moms or something? Or
I do, yeah. So we call them a night out because everyone's welcome. And typically moms are the ones who come looking for just an evening to do something different, and that is actually one component to this community piece, because families are coming to a specific class with the same small group, but then there are these other classes happening. So it's like lanes on a highway that they may not come into contact with each other very often. Well, then what I love to do is bring people together for all different kinds of events, including that. So yes, we've done everything from flower arranging to we carved rubber stamps, and we have done cookie decorating, and we have done we've made soap, and so a lot, and other things too, like yoga classes. And it's not only artistic activities, but I do find that those artistic experiences are so popular, and that moms especially are looking for that in their lives, and kind of looking for plug and play ways to be able to participate, because at a time of life that feels busy and overwhelming, getting over the hump of getting started can be difficult. So if all I have to do is register and arrive, and somebody else has set everything up for me, that feels great. And then, it's almost like if I didn't turn the lights off, they would never leave, because we're having, the conversation is great, but also just, enjoying the process of, we have done hand lettering, for example. Like, yeah, my Christmas cards will be addressed beautifully, but also I am experiencing the joy of making this beautiful lettering instead of just scribbling it out like my grocery list,
Well, and I think also being with other people too, and having that sense of community, especially at that stage of life, but really, any stage of life. I moved back to Rhode Island a couple of years ago, and I started a women's group locally, a creative women's group, where we get together and we meet and we knit and crochet, and we go to pretty places for lunch and talk about art and creativity. And I'm finding that at really every stage that we need that community experience. And a lot of people feel they're not creative, and then they come and they're part of something, and that vision shifts, or that feeling changes, or something opens up to them. Do you have, do you get a sense of that when people come to your get-togethers that certain people don't feel like they're creative or they don't have creativity in them?
I think oftentimes what I would say more so is that people feel kind of a pull and a push, because on one hand they feel drawn to the creative experience. They want to be able to make the thing that we're making, and produce. But then the flip side is that as adults we become a lot more self-conscious, and we start to feel like mine doesn't look as nice as my neighbor's, or as the instructor's. There's no way I can do it. And so sometimes people hold back a bit. And I think the nice thing about this environment is that it's, it's kind of a safe, comfortable place. Everyone knows that nobody's judging. No one cares if your rubber stamp doesn't look exactly the way you envisioned it or exactly like mine. And I think, what we're trying to do, it's a parallel with feeling comfortable being around this group of parents, because, if your child's having a rough day and crying or responding in sort of something that in a way that's kind of like upsetting the apple cart of the community, like that, you can feel judgment and pressure. And I think what I'm trying to create for people in every element of the space that we have is, we are all human beings doing our very best. We are caring about being as positive a part of the community as we can. And that means we do not have to be perfect. We do not have to show up, like a glossy magazine cover, and they see that I occasionally, forgot the apples at home or whatever it is. Like nobody has to be perfect. So I hope that people come to these activities, specifically if we're talking about these artistic experiences, with a sense of openness. And I think, the group does a great job of kind of bringing everybody to this same place of what you're doing is great and what I'm doing is great. They don't have to look the same. And we can just enjoy this, being together. So,
yeah. One of the things that a lot of my podcast guests talk about is creative play and just creating for the sake of just play and discovery. And we've talked a little bit about that. And I wondered, because you have such a unique, what's the word, perspective on this, because of, who you work with, the age groups that you work with. They don't really have a choice. That's just what they know to do. But I would love it if you could maybe share some ideas on, that even could translate to anybody on, in your experience, some ways of just releasing those expectations creatively and just playing, because a lot of people don't know what that means.
Well, I think some of it comes from, and if I'm talking to parents specifically versus talking to adults coming together for their own purposes, it might be a little different conversation. But I think a thread that runs through both is just really deliberately giving permission for there to be no expected endpoint. And it's ironic that I'm saying that, because I am actually personally kind of a perfectionist, and I like things to go away, and I like things to come out the way I pictured them. So I'm saying this, I guess, as much to myself as I would say it to anybody else. But a thread that runs through classes with children is, I had such a really meaningful conversation with a mom the other week, where we were talking about the concept of sitting on our hands when our kids are working with an activity. So in this case, it was a puzzle. And, of course, the adult mind says, the zebra goes here, the elephant goes here. How can you not see that? Of course, we know that they may not see it yet. It's not that we're angry at the children, but it's what we want to do is show them where these pieces go. And the explanation, that I gave to her is, you could show him and he will learn this is where the elephant goes. Or you could wait and let him get to the place that this is where the elephant goes. And what will he have gained from that experience? A lot of things, self-confidence, belief in his ability to solve problems, a real understanding of the shape of the parts of the elephant and how those pieces fit together, as opposed to almost like this robotic, you told me, now I can repeat it. And so where back to the original question, if what I'm doing with families, or what adults are doing when they're trying to do something creative, is I must get to this certain place, instead of allowing that process to unfold, what am I losing? And I think when I this one conversation really does come to mind, but I've had a lot of versions of it in the past, where there's almost like a light bulb feeling that if we say we don't have to have a certain outcome, then the process of getting to whatever that outcome is becomes a lot more meaningful, honestly. So sometimes, though, it's being very deliberate with ourselves or with our kids to say that. And then I hope that by practicing, it becomes habit. And then we sort of have an overall openness about us that allows us to have high standards and care about doing things in a way that feels, meaningful and feels like respectful of the task, but also being okay with the fact that things might not always go as we planned, and things might not always turn out exactly as we expect, and that's a part of being human, and that's an okay thing. And gosh, if we think about all the discoveries that have been made in humanity just by accident, and if we hadn't allowed, antibiotics and what else, right? Like, if we just think about all these different mistakes that became so much more important than whatever was originally expected, it feels a lot more natural to allow some of that to happen without so much worry about the product.
Right. Or worrying about like a straight line, like a direct line to something, and being open to offshoots and not knowing where something's going to go. It could go in a totally different direction. Right. And
just being open to that, like meandering, as valuable in itself, and as just as valuable as whatever the outcome is, whether, did I make a discovery? Yes or no? That is valuable, but also what was the experience like getting to that point?
And you might not like the experience too, and you might not want to do it again.
Sure, it's uncomfortable.
So yeah,
right.
I mean, you might decide that wasn't the path for you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have loved this conversation. I could feel like I could talk to you for like hours. Is there
Thank you. Same.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you could share, or that you want to share?
I think just a closing thought would be that, I'm talking about my own personal experience, but I know everybody listening has a different journey that they're going on. And if they're coming to this podcast, they're coming because this concept of creativity calls to them. And, I think that creativity is in everyone. I don't know that everyone has awareness of how much it could or should factor into their own life. But if somebody's seeking that, just to that it's valuable to allow yourself to experience process in life. And I feel like I have, if I look back at the path I have taken to where I am, I would never in a million years have expected that I would end up in this place. And so whether I myself was open to it, or whether other people in my life were helping me be in a place that I could be open to different shifts and changes, those are the things that have really enabled me to be doing this thing that I consider to be really my calling. Someone said, what other job would you like to do? Maybe I could come up with one, but I also feel like I have really reached the peak of what I am kind of like meant to do on earth. And how could I have gotten there if not for being open to a meandering path of kind of like creating your own life, I guess. And so the creativity we explore as a part of like an artistic process or whatever is really almost like a metaphor for like this concept of creating a whole life for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And just what a meaningful gift that is, that as people that we have.
That's wonderful. It's a gift for ourselves and our families, and what a gift for all your like extended families now from your students. And
right. Yeah,
it's just a ripple effect.
Just the way we show up in the world overall. Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And I love talking to you, and I look forward to staying in touch, and you're doing great work.
Same. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
As I think back on my conversation with Jessica, what really stays with me is this idea that creativity isn't about the end product. It's about the process. That's something we can forget so easily as adults. We get caught up in outcomes and in perfection and in measuring ourselves against results. But in Montessori and in creativity, the value is in the making and the exploring and the curiosity. Jessica reminded us that children thrive when we create environments that encourage discovery rather than control. And the truth is, so do we. Whether it's setting up a Montessori classroom, guiding our kids at home, or simply allowing ourselves space to experiment without judgment, we all benefit from freedom within structure. I also loved how she talked about community. The families she works with aren't just learning principles, they're creating an ecosystem where everyone supports each other. And that's such a powerful reminder for us too. We don't have to pursue creativity or growth alone. Having people around us who encourage exploration and self-expression makes all the difference. And maybe, most importantly, Jessica gave us permission to let go of perfection. Creativity is already in us. It doesn't have to look polished or impressive. It can be messy and playful and simple or small. The joy of making, as she said, is valuable all on its own. So here's my takeaway for you. Ask yourself where in your life you can give yourself or your children more room to play. Where can you step back from the pressure of the outcome and simply enjoy the process? Creativity isn't something to add to your list. It's a way of being. It shows up in parenting, in community, in work, in the everyday choices we make. And when we embrace it fully, we don't just grow, we thrive. Thank you for listening, and I hope you carry this reminder into your own life this week. Creativity is in everyone, and it's always available if you look for it. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe for free and share it with a friend. It helps others find the show and grows our community. Remember, creativity is yours to define, there are no rules, and it's never too late. Until next time.